I'm Bryce Butler from Access Ventures, and this is More Than Profit, a show where I talk with founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders of all kinds about living and working with purpose, how they do it, and why. My guest today is Bob Pattillo, a man that many of you in the impact investment world might be familiar with. He's been an early pioneer and a man that's gone pretty much all in with his personal wealth as it relates to impact investing and really pressing into the stories and the lives of entrepreneurs across the world and getting to know them personally and trying to leverage capital in ways to bring their hopes and dreams to life. For those of you who don't know him or aren't familiar with impact investing, Bob in the late 90s was an early pioneer in microfinance and then later went into impact investing more specifically. I was the founder of Grey Ghost Ventures and Grey Matters Capital. And I personally came to know him through our shared work in Village Capital. He actually, if you didn't know it, was one of the co-founders of Village Capital over a decade ago. And for the last 6 years, I've had the pleasure of serving on the board, and getting to know Bob has been a treat. And so sitting down with him today to talk about his life and purpose, but more specifically to talk with him about the lessons learned in his journey of business and real estate and also impact investing, the pain of that, the joy of that, as well as what we as a field should be on the lookout for as we press into the future as we're now several decades into impact investing and trying to go mainstream, what we should be on the watch for. And so it was a joy to sit down with him and to learn about those things, but also to learn a little bit about the man and the past that shaped his perspective on the world.
For me, it's a family history, and it's actually a little wild. I had two uncles, Uncle Buck and Uncle Bill, that started the Thunderbirds in the 50s. So, completely crazy. My grandfather was a sharecropper, just poor as a church mouse. 3 acres of cotton, something like that. It was wild. I was sitting with some farmers in India about 12 years ago and just looking them in the eye and thinking this could absolutely be my grandfather. So, it's amazing. 2 generations is nothing. And yet he made choices to get my father an education and to get him on a path. Really, they were the first construction company to be integrated, to have blacks on the same crews as whites. They started in the real estate business because they had a bunch of leftover materials and they wanted to keep the crew together. So they started building small buildings with the leftovers. Huh. And then when it came time and they found somebody to take the building, they said, I don't want to buy it. I just want to rent it. So they backed into the real estate business to really do something good for their people. So, in retrospect, they didn't call it impact investing, but that's what it was. Yeah.
Well, I think you highlight kind of what we, I think, mutually believe is just that business has an impact. And independent of like the label impact investing, all businesses, positive, neutral, or negative. And so the notion of triple bottom line or how you think about resource allocation or people, that the notion of profit is more than just this financial bottom line, but how you really think about community, people, and when you think about people in the context of business, you're gonna do things differently. You're gonna keep them employed. You're gonna think creatively to pay them a living wage and to give them opportunities that may not make the most financial sense if you're looking at it just from ones and zeros on a balance sheet. So that's neat.
Yeah, I think the secret can be, local. Yeah. Do you live in the same community that your company exists, that your employees, do they live in that community? Bhopal would have never happened that the CEO, lived in that town. It's just beyond imagination.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I believe you're right.
And so you grew up obviously with your father, who was a little more educated, had built this company. What did that look like for you growing up, and then going off to a college, and inevitably you came back to that business. Where did that kind of fit into the sequence of your life?
Well, I hadn't really planned to talk about this, but I think it's relevant. Both of us have Asperger's, and he never had it assessed, and I didn't have it assessed until about 4 years ago. But it really made me understand him in a different way myself. So one of the things about Asperger's is we have a sort of an obsessive gene. And what they used to say about my father is he didn't want all the land in the world. He just wanted what was next to him. And being of Scottish descent, he saved every nickel. So growing up with him as a father, I will say professionally and aspirationally was terrific. Asperger's, we also have trouble with social relationships, and so it wasn't a lot of warmth there.
Yeah.
And so I worked for him. Yes, he went to Dartmouth, went to a public elementary and high school, and then went to Dartmouth, and it was, I guess you could say, an emergence for me. With a family with wealth, you always wonder if your success is tied to what you have rather than who you are. Until I got to Dartmouth, and then if it wasn't up to me, it would have been, I would have been sent home, the fall quarter. And so that was a great thing for me to just say, okay, I've got some gifts, including the opportunity to be here, and I better just knuckle up, hunker down, and go for it.
Yeah.
So I came back. I actually got a job in Mobile, Alabama, with the International Paper Company, and my father was like, "Wait, got to come back to the family business."
Wow!
And so he did recruit me, or encourage me, and I started in sales. And for me, this is a theme actually. Just the customer focus. Rather than construction and being really proud of your design, it ultimately matters, how your customer experiences that design, and the quality and the speed. And that really changed, in the South, while we were way behind when I started. So it wasn't really that hard to know how to pivot, and this is, of course, a theme with impact investing, not only in your investment strategy, but in the enterprises that we invest in. So that was a firsthand crash course in running a venture. I was made president at way too early an age, 27. Again, I was pretty good at strategy. I was terrible with people. I just didn't truly appreciate how people think and how to create an environment where people feel safe, and secure, and can share their dreams and, give it their extra in tough times. I ended up getting fired.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was 33.
Wow.
By my sisters. So, and what seemed like a tragedy ended up being a huge blessing in time.
How did that make you feel? I mean, here are your sisters, you've been hired in by your dad, you're running this company, you're realizing pretty profoundly you don't maybe connect with people as you should in management, and then to ultimately be pushed out at 33. How did that feel? Where did your life go from there professionally, which I think will get us into the next conversation around what you've been known for the last couple of decades?
Okay, so I was responsible for the family business from age 27 to 33. So I had been observing, though, up until, for the 6 years up to 27. So I made some pretty radical changes, and they may not seem like much, but they're very customer focused. Just building out of concrete, going up to 36 foot instead of 22 feet, and that extra cube. But it meant we had to lay off our masonry crew. And it was one guy that worked with us for 36 years, right? My sister, older sister, is an artist. And, for her, that was a bigger deal than making money, right? And it wasn't about making money for me, but it was about running a first class organization, okay? And that was innovative. But it was also painful to my dad, and he took it personally. And when I say painful, my oldest sister, she kind of led the charge. She put, his feelings ahead of perhaps what was best for the enterprise, because we were, even though we were very successful, and I wasn't that diplomatic, I'll have to say. I was, I was cocky and it was like a G cool kind of thing, wow, look at our sales, they're way up, and and I didn't think about how that might have felt, to my dad. And yes, he was proud, but it was also like, Oedipus, here I am in some ways making him look bad that he didn't make these changes when he was CEO. And I had no clue. I did not see that coming. So I did not see the firing coming. I at first was okay. I was like, I don't understand it. It's a mystery. But, I have some real estate, that was in my name. So I said, well, we'll just divide it up basically in thirds and, I'll move on, and I know I did my best for you. And, was it what you wanted? I don't know, but it was the best I could do. And, we'll divide the people up. I had hired most of the people, and they said, oh, you're not taking anybody with you. And I said, these people are loyal to me, I thought. So my first, that sentence, I became afraid.
Wow.
Because, your team that you work with every day, your colleagues, were essential, I thought, to my success. And so that was a scary moment. It wasn't so much financially, but it was, I guess you'd say professionally. My wife was in the hospital with a placenta previa, like on the edge of life or death, right at that moment. So the timing for my sister, so I didn't have time to mess around. I had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, and then I'd go to the hospital and be with my wife, and I'd go to work to run through the transition, and start my new venture. And it was just, I didn't have time to be angry, really. Right. I didn't have time to I just had to, dig in. I could pursue deeply some of the strategies that I had been trying on the edge. And we went after one product type. And I think this is when I really became an entrepreneur. Okay. And so you talk about the connection between the real estate and the microfinance and impact investing. It was called a STCDE, a single tenant cross stock expandable building. And it was really the logistics world that was changing. And so all the buildings were like Amazon buildings, right? So instead of having 30 warehouses across the country, you have 3, California, Northeast, Southeast, maybe 4 or 5. And so I watched, again, customer focus. I watched where the customer couldn't find an existing building that they wanted to take, so they had to build one and go to a great delay and expense and do something that's not within their expertise, just so they could be in the location and have the building design that they wanted. So I basically followed them around, right? I just, Louisville, Kentucky, next to UPS. I said, okay, I'm just going to try a spec building. We built a 400,000 square foot spec building in Louisville, Kentucky. It was the biggest building, spec building that was built by a factor of 10. So people thought I was crazy. Well, bang, we had prospect after prospect after prospect. I mean, it was just as fast as we could go.
Wow.
So that was fun. We became the 8th largest industrial developer in the United States. And, I don't say that bragging. It was a gee whiz thing for me. It was like, this is way bigger than I ever imagined. And it's way bigger in fact, we made it to 8th, was put in the paper. I didn't even know it. And so, you feel like you're part of something really big.
Yeah.
And you're helping to create it, but that there's this, however you want to say it, higher power, a spirit that's also present and also creating, whether they're working through the customer to guide you, or through your employees, or through your mentors. I had a couple of lenders that were really great coaches. And I think the sense of purpose, I really wasn't wild about putting money in my pocket. It was really, we were building a foundation at that time.
It's interesting. I was just going to say, it's interesting to kind of hear you talk through that change and being let go, being surprised by the family. There's a couple of things, because I'm hearing you say also, like, your sister, the vision of your sister and your father was different. It wasn't necessarily bad. It was just different. And so a passion for a business in this fashion versus a passion for creativity and innovation and pressing forward with a new business model. It's unfortunate, but oftentimes, two competing visions in one business make it, are not tenable. And so what resulted was this separation. But it allowed you, even in the midst of your grief and your anger, to kind of press forward. I was on a panel this morning, even with talking about just the COVID crisis and how can we use the crisis as a catapult for innovation. And it sounds like in the business, you were able to kind of take what was a personal crisis and really try something that resulted in unbelievable growth for your business. So then I want to fast forward a little bit to how did you go from, this family business, real estate, 8th largest industrial? What was the flipping point, the turning point rather, for you to this idea of impact investing?
I think it probably maybe a little. There was a time when one of the leaders in microfinance was Steve Rockefeller. I haven't kept up with him for the last 20 years, but he invited me to a conference. It was called Wealth with Responsibility. And that ended up being Deutsche Bank. But, Steve Rockefeller calls, you just take the call. It's like, okay. And I remember we were shooting pool down in the basement. And I had been asking everybody I knew or I encountered that I respected, what are you doing with your life that brings you joy? It can be professional, but it can be outside professional. It can be just, and he laid his cue down and started talking about microfinance and for 25 minutes. And, I came out of real estate sales, so I didn't even know anything about finance. Right. But when he stopped talking, I said, I don't know what you just told me, but I want some of what's on your face right now.
Wow.
And so it was clear that my life was not as fulfilling as I wanted it to be. The success, in real estate was scratching that professional itch, but it was there was more. I had a life coach at the time, and he was obsessed with balance, right? You got to spend time in your father bucket. You got to spend time in your husband bucket, your faith bucket, and make your lists and check them off and whatnot. And I followed this, and it was definitely a kickstart. But then I thought, wait a minute. What if I invested in a way that was helpful, to the communities? I started thinking about putting grass on the roofs of these buildings, right? And so the water they were prettier, and then also the water would go slower off the flow of the site. It's and I thought, just to be a good citizen, and so there's some convergence between, the three things. There's some, the spending, saving, giving. It's really that simple. Between, the saving or investing and the giving back to, the community, and, the spending, for me was about the experience of joy, and, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
One of your questions is about purpose, and another word for purpose is calling. I think it was Buchner that said, our calling is where the world's greatest needs intersect with your greatest joy. And people think about a calling in terms of, I gotta go and serve, and it's supposed to be hard, and these things, and it is hard. Joy is not happiness. It's about satisfaction and fulfillment, and feeling part of something. And so I wasn't feeling that in the real estate, and so I am sort of bold, So I just he invited me to a fund meeting, a little $3 million fund that Assad Mahmoud was managing at the time. And Assad really became my guide, my Sacagawea, to Lewis and Clark, and I just soaked it up. I quickly realized that I really wasn't going to understand microfinance, from reading a balance sheet or cash flow or assets under management or PAR or these things. I had to go see it.
Yeah.
And so I took a round the world trip, visiting microfinance banks all over the world. And it was really, I got to meet Dr. Yunus. I got to meet some very inspiring leaders. But it was a borrower in Bangladesh who I had met during a group meeting, and she invited me back to her hut, with a translator and this kind of thing. And it was mind blowing, to see again her hospitality. And for some reason, we started talking about. I asked her, what are your dreams? And her head's down like this, and she starts to talk about her dreams for her children, for especially her girl child, who she hoped to be able to stay in school as long as the boy, and she had dreams for her relationship with her husband, that she would be in on some of the family decisions that were important. She had dreams for her business. It was really interesting how she felt respected and rewarded and successful in her dreams. Yeah. It was the supplier that she wanted to be able to negotiate with that supplier with strength. And if she had that loan and that capital in hand, the cash in hand, she could do it. She could get much, much better terms, Then she started talking about walking down the path in her village and just having the elders nod to her, and feeling part of a community, helping make it a better place. She wanted to serve on the village council. She wanted to stop honor killing, in her village. She had dreams for the Bangladeshi people. This woman's 27 years old or maybe 28. And she says, more Bangladeshi serve in the UN peacekeeping forces than any other country. Yeah. Not in percentage terms, in absolute terms. She's very proud of that. And then she looked at me and she goes, well, what are your dreams?
Wow.
And I came to understand, that was like a flash in microfinance. She can now consider me a peer.
Wow.
And yes, she's a borrower and I'm a lender, but she looks me dead in the eye, and she knows that she's critical, to the success of that microfinance bank, right?
Yeah.
And
The mutual benefit.
Yeah. And so as I was thinking about her question, I said, my dreams sound a lot like your dreams,
Yeah.
right? I would love to be prouder of my country.
Yeah, exactly.
At this moment, we are not so well led. I won't even say who was president at the time, but and what am I looking for? I'm looking for a future for my kids, and I'm looking for, a respectful relationship with my wife, to be, cared for in my community. So this became it was just like a lightning striking, in terms of my whole, this became my purpose. It wasn't about, pity. It was about power. It really was. And I saw that woman, even as I was speaking to her, gain confidence and feel, her eyes going up, and her shoulders, becoming more upfront and feeling more powerful.
That's great.
And so it is that mutual benefit, or I call it co-creation.
Co-creation. With your customer. Good word.
That she knows what's best for her village way better than even a side by mood. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I think the best impact enterprises follow the lead, of their customers. What's the other products and services that they need? Why is it important for it to be efficient? Why customer retention is important. Treat me well, even though I'm already, it's not just marketing to get the customers, marketing to retain them is even more important. So I learned a lot.
That's great. Well, you have these moments, and you and I have talked before about just the power of story. And so it's great to hear you capture these stories that have been just so profound. One, the time with your daughter in Morocco, and then this one, and then and probably several others. But you've now gone on over the last couple of decades, even before impact investing was even coined, and just been a pioneer and putting everything on the line and saying, I want to chase this. This becomes my dream. How can I use the power I've been given to empower others and to elevate their dreams and wishes for their community and for their families? I'd love to get your perspective. Okay, so this was late 90s, I think, when you got into the microfinance. We're 2020. Looking back and looking forward, what are some concerns, or what are some things that you think we should be watching as we look to the future of impact investing? There's a lot going on in our world, from COVID-19 to the economic injustice and the social injustice in America right now. What should we be paying attention to as we look to kind of continue to press into this mission?
Well, a simple one, I think, for investors, but so rarely done, is really showing up and being present. And I'm not talking about with the bank president or the loan officer. It's back to getting in the field, okay, and observing, having these conversations. It takes looking at yourself a different way. I have tremendous respect for, for say Gates or Zuckerberg, Chan, to go into Nigeria, and talk to folks. But if you fly in on a private jet, and your experience is going to be, people are going to treat you differently, right? I had a guy with a microfinance bank in India that just taught this so profoundly. We drove, out 40 miles from Bangalore, and we stayed in a hotel. It was $4 a night. Okay. And he would take students and professors and investors, and we were all piled in the same van, right? Young and old, blue jeans, dirty sneakers. And so the people we were talking to didn't know me, they didn't hold me in any special status. And so you get the truth. You get you get some criticism. You get to know, like, people aren't sucking up to you. They're, like, why are you here?
Mm.
What's your purpose?
Yeah.
And to answer those questions, they stick. And so when you go back home and you're trying to decide what to invest in, uh, uh, it matters. Another life coach taught me, he said, really to try to define my life purpose. And he said it simply. He says, what I see you doing is having courage and encouraging.
Having courage and encouraging. I like
both.
that. Yeah.
And I know you saw it with Village Capital. Village Capital started this crazy thing, peer selected, investment. I mean, it really was. We were called, what did Kevin call it? Bonkers. He said I was bonkers. But I enjoyed talking to the entrepreneurs, and I was inspired by them. And I did try to encourage them. And oftentimes that encouragement was a bigger deal than the $50,000 check. That's important too. But
I think you're hitting on something that's really interesting. This idea of presence. And I think what I'm also hearing you say is like this notion of humility, presence and humility, which I think is a helpful thing to kind of come in, not projecting that you know everything, and listening and being willing to kind of, how do you use your courage? How do you have courage, and how do you encourage? And I think it's interesting because, like, we're kind of at this point, previous conferences, even this year, talking about going mainstream and just the exciting opportunity where there seems to be some outcomes around impact investing or value aligned investing that are showing it's financially a sure thing or a good thing to do, and that it beats benchmarks. But I think what I'm hearing you say is there is a concern as things go mainstream, if you will, they get more broad adoption. We corporatize them. We lose touch with the stories and the people, and don't take the time to travel, to meet with the entrepreneurs and hear their stories and their dreams, and to share our stories and our dreams, where there's going to be real connection, and maybe something completely different than what you thought you were going there to invest in emerges.
I guess I haven't put so much focus on relationships. This is very personal, but because I've been, let down. I've had my heart broken in so many ways. And so to the extent that I can be inspired, by a moment, by being present, fully present, and, having that memory. Your memories, are with you always. And you file something to the alpha state, the brainwave there, and, that memory can guide you. The picture of, I was with Teju of Unreasonable Institute by phone, by Zoom, and just a couple of weeks ago, and he asked me to talk about, what was going on in my life. It was really partly the purpose of pain. That's what he wanted to know. And to see his face after the conversation just really radiate, really, that's what brings me joy. And I hadn't spoken to him in 8 years, so do you call that a relationship? I mean, it's not your definition, but many of those experiences do guide me as if it were an ongoing relationship. I don't know if that makes sense, but again, I'm not preaching this, believe me. I'm not even suggesting or inviting people to consider it this way. This is just my way.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, we were talking about friendship. We were talking about moments and the impact of those moments. I don't think that's atypical. I mean, I think everyone has experienced pain. And so you and I were kind of joking before we kind of went live on this, but just around the purpose of pain. And I actually think there's something profound there. So I loved what you were talking about with joy versus happiness, but this notion of pain. And so I don't know if you have any kind of parting thoughts as it relates to just how you've experienced pain. I know you're just coming back from a sabbatical, but just some lessons just that pain has taught you as you've kind of gone through life that might be helpful for people. because it's something that we all experience. It's part of the human condition. And so how can we help one another navigate and find joy in the midst of pain? Is there anything that you've learned that would be helpful for people listening?
Yeah, there's been some suffering times, and I don't mean just weeks and months, but I mean for years. And, you can call it depression but there was definitely times when it was hard to get out of bed, feeling like a failure, not feeling powerful, not feeling like that woman, who could get up. In some ways being inspired by her, having that memory and bringing it back. But I think, again, defining success, what is our purpose? And if I am there to encourage, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing this work to be financially successful. I mean, I've had we have a lender in India called the Indian School Finance Company, and we've had 6 rounds of negotiations over 2.5 years to put new capital in. We have 400 employees. So I think about if we're not successful with this, they're going to be out of work.
Yeah.
And, that's almost more than I can bear, really, if I fail in that. And I think just in some ways letting go and just taking those deep breaths and realizing it's not up to me. I need to do my part. I have a daughter that's in recovery, and she's been clean for 3.5 years. And it was no small. It was heroin, and she talks again publicly about this. But for her to beat that, it's every day.
Every day,
and she wakes up grateful for life every day. And now she's in a wonderful partnership. She's going to be married August 8th. She just finished law school, 5th in her class. She has a job. She got the offer letter from King and Spalding. She says, she called him up. There's a typo.
Yeah.
There's an extra digit in this offer. 3, it's going to be 6 digits instead of 5. She said, no, that's right. And so it's just like she laughs, and nothing knocks it down.
I want to thank Bob for coming on the podcast today and his radical transparency and opening up on the values of presence, the purpose of pain, and lessons that he's learned in life and business. I want to let our listeners know also about an exciting opportunity, a virtual pitch event where 16 companies will pitch to receive one of 8 $100,000 investments. To learn more, check out render.capital/competition. You won't want to miss this exciting event. Again, if you've liked what you've heard, drop us a review, subscribe, and stay tuned for next week's episode. Check out our work at accessventures.org. I'm Bryce Butler. Thanks for listening.